Pam Bondi promised us the Epstein files. But when the big release finally dropped in early 2026, out of the 3.5 million pages of evidence they allegedly dropped, folks noticed something was missing: the perpetrators' names. But just a year earlier, the same woman bragged that the client list was sitting on her desk. So were we lied to? Or are we being gaslit to protect the powerful? The answer is much darker than we ever thought possible. Welcome to Darling It's Dark. Now, before Bondi was Attorney General for the United States, she was Attorney General of Florida from 2011 to 2019, the first woman to ever hold that job in the state. Her primary focus for her time in Florida was drug enforcement and human trafficking, which is kind of ironic given what transpires a decade later, but I digress. Her being elected to this position was in part thanks to Epstein. We covered this in our video about Epstein's Island, which I'll link below if you want to check that out as well, but long story short, Epstein was arrested before 2019. He was charged with prostitution of a minor in 2008. Essentially, his sentence was a joke, which infuriated the Palm Beach police force and the folks of Palm Beach. But none of this involved Pam Bondi. Yet. She wasn't Attorney General in Florida. It was her predecessor, Bill McCollum, and federal prosecutor Alexander Acosta. So when election time came around in 2011, McCollum didn't run for re-election, and Bondi's vow to punish traffickers must have sounded good to the folks of Florida, since she then went on to win the seat. Now, as Attorney General of Florida, she wasn't exactly considered a crusader of the law. And ironically, one of those situations involved Donald Trump. This was 2013. Her office was getting fraud complaints about Trump University. Right around the same time, she asked Donald Trump for a campaign donation, which he did. His foundation cut her a $25,000 check. But shortly after, her office dropped the inquiry into Trump University, saying there were insufficient grounds to move forward. Neither ever admitted to wrongdoing. Shocker. And that was just the start of their alliance. In 2016, Bondi was a vocal supporter for Trump's election, and during the Senate impeachment trial, she was temporarily hired as a special advisor to the White House to serve on his defense and communications team. Then, when Trump ultimately lost the 2020 presidential election, Bondi was immediately there to challenge the results. Overall, this tells us Pam Bondi and Donald Trump have formed some kind of alliance. He's called to her at his time of need, and she shows up. So that brings us to late 2024. Donald Trump has been voted president again, and his pick, Matt Gaetz, withdraws his nomination for the U.S. Attorney General. Pam Bondi swoops in to save the day, is then confirmed on February 4th, 2025, and sworn in the following day. Immediately after taking office, she officially requests all the withheld Epstein documents from the FBI. She demands an investigation into why they hadn't been turned over to the DOJ yet. And at this point, she seems like a woman who is ready to take care of business. Girl's gonna get the job done. Then, a little over 2 weeks later, she went on Fox News' America Reports and declared that the highly anticipated Epstein client list is sitting right there on her desk for review. She frames it as a direct order from President Trump to finally give the public the transparency they've been begging for. And she says the JFK and MLK files are there too, again, at the order of Trump. Then, the narrative shifts. In July 2025, the DOJ released a statement claiming that no incriminating client list actually existed. So 5 months later, it went from sitting on her desk to never having existed at all. Yeah, okay. I don't buy it, and neither did Congress. They passed the 2025 Epstein Files Transparency Act, which forced the DOJ to release grand jury records and case files. Except when the DOJ finally released the documents, they only released just shy of 4,000 files out of millions. And believe it or not, that wasn't even the worst part. The files were heavily redacted. The names of high-profile male figures and potential co-conspirators were blacked out, while identifying information about Epstein's victims were exposed. More files were released the following month, but the damage was done. The fallout was immediate, and Pam Bondi lost her ever-loving mind. She blamed time, that the redaction work was the best the DOJ could do given the 30-day timeline, and that the error limit was very low. Immediately played it off. Then she deflected. Why hadn't previous administrations done anything in the past, mentioning Bush and Obama by name? Then things took a hostile turn. She called Representative Jamie Raskin a washed-up loser lawyer and claimed that he wasn't a real lawyer, which he is, by the way. When Representative Thomas Massie, who actually co-sponsored the Transparency Act, asked who was responsible for the redaction errors, she called him a hypocrite and accused him of suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Then, like the icing on a cake, she screamed, "Don't you ever accuse me of committing a crime," at Representative Ted Lieu. Now, this last exchange with Ted Lieu is arguably the most heated, for lack of a better word. I don't have the same gusto as either of these folks do in this video, so I'm just gonna play the clip.
Yeah, I don't know how you respond. No one can.
I did not ask a question,
He
Mr.
doesn't You're allowed to.
I did not ask a question.
Crime in California. He does not want to talk about
I did not ask a
crime
question.
in his state.
She can't just
Madam
ad
Attorney
lib
General.
stuff. I did not ask a
Trump.
question.
Meeting will be in order.
Wow. Wow. It's so hard to watch because you know she knows. But that's only part of the frustration, right? I mean, there have been 0 people charged from the files since they're released to the public. And the only ones that the US has charged at all were Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein himself. And if that isn't infuriating enough, the Department of Justice under the current administration has officially closed the door on new federal indictments. In February 2026, Todd Blanche, who was Deputy Attorney General at the time, publicly stated that the DOJ had reviewed the files and concluded there was nothing in there that allowed us to prosecute anybody. I'm sorry, what? 3 million pages and nothing? I literally read diary entries recounting sexual and physical abuse on the DOJ website. Yet, this man says there is nothing. We have survivors who've had to relive every excruciating detail for evidence, and there is nothing. Victoria Giuffre wrote a book, a whole memoir on her time with Epstein. It's just so frustrating. There is literally mountains of evidence, and the DOJ is just like, I don't know. Seriously, areas of Europe, like France and the UK, are running investigations of their own, while the DOJ is doing nothing but stalling. The UK arrested and questioned Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, known in the past as Prince Andrew, in 2026 over allegations tied to the Epstein files. France, too, has been operating its own inquisition. Then, on April 2nd, 2026, President Trump fires her. He posts on Truth Social saying she's moving to the private sector and replaces her with Todd Blanche, who was her second in command. We mentioned his name earlier, and fun fact, he was Trump's defense attorney during his first term in office. Now, rumor has it this was coming, and Trump was planning to let her go for some time. And although there's never been an official reason released, allegedly the president was frustrated she wasn't prosecuting his political rivals, but also the butchering of the Epstein files. First off, there is no private job lined up. According to CNN, we have no clue what that job is. But also, this does not sound like an upset Trump. The day before, he was threatening to blow up Iran. When Robert Mueller died, he was like, good. So he's not someone afraid to say what he means. and thinks before he speaks, you know? Yet this message is very complimentary. She's referred to as faithful, that she did a tremendous job cracking down on crime. But he fired her. You don't say someone did a great job before letting them go. And even though Bondi literally just lost her job, she called the position an honor, said she would continue to support Donald Trump, and that she would work with the new acting Attorney General Todd Blanche for a smooth transition. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever been fired, but usually you're pretty upset. And maybe she was, but it's not adding up. You have two people, not exactly famous for being level-headed, acting very civil to one another. The tone from both sides seems off for them. But once you hear this, it all makes sense. In mid-March, Bondi was subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee. Both parties of representatives signed this document for a closed-doors deposition on the 14th of April. Now, this all comes about from their last explosive meeting, when Bondi was then accused by Representative Liu of perjury. So the goal of this deposition was to get answers on the DOJ's handling of the Epstein investigation, why documents were withheld and powerful names redacted, and more importantly, well, equally as important, why has the US decided to not prosecute co-conspirators? Same. I want to know too. Anyways, April 2nd rolls around and Pam Bondi is fired, days before she was supposed to testify. Conveniently, the Justice Department sent a letter to Congress arguing that Bondi no longer has to comply with the subpoena. Why, you might ask? Well, because the subpoena was issued to her in her official capacity as U.S. Attorney General. Since she no longer holds that office, the DOJ views the subpoena as void. Lawmakers in the House Oversight Committee were pretty ticked, understandably so. As it stands now, the House is attempting to work with Bondi's personal attorneys directly to negotiate next steps and attempt to force a rescheduled date for her testimony. I guess we'll see. I mean, my thoughts on this are pure speculation, but the whole situation doesn't settle right with me. She gets this subpoena, and then days later, she's fired by this weird love note from Donald Trump. And then magically, as a direct result of her losing that position, the DOJ's like, well, she's off the hook. Pam's not the Attorney General, so she's not coming. And she didn't. Like, there's no closure. I fully believe there is a client list, or at least information, whether it be written, photographs, or videos, some spec that shows who was an active participant of the illegal acts. Honestly, all this is doing is hurting the victims. Maria and Annie Farmer released in a joint statement, "Survivors have waited nearly 3 decades for answers. How much longer must we wait? Any further delays only deepen survivors' pain and weakens our confidence in the government's willingness to hold accountable those who enabled and perpetrated Epstein's heinous crimes." Absolutely, I agree with them 100%. At the end of the day, the ones that are suffering aren't the elite, not even the politicians. It's the victims. Our clock is eventually going to run out. Administrations will change. The statute of limitations will cause cases to be thrown out. This isn't something that can just go away. We need to be active about this, because if we don't demand accountability, we're essentially just handing the elite a hall pass to commit whatever atrocities they want. And honestly, the message that sends to every little girl and young woman watching is that their lives and their safety simply don't matter. And we cannot let that happen. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. What's your take on the whole Bondi-Trump relationship? Do you think the message was weird or just me? Or what do you want to hear about next? Let me know in the comments. I love a good hyperfixation. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more dark videos. It really helps keep things running. Thanks again for watching. See you soon.